Welcome to Good Life. I'm Dean Wilson. I'm so glad you're with us wherever you're joining us. If you're joining us locally on the airwaves here in Santa Barbara, California, at TV Santa Barbara, we welcome you. We're so grateful for all of you who are joining us from around the world at goodlifetelevision.org and on our podcast, Good Life Conversations, which you can find at all Spotify and all the different platforms. We see many of you are joining us there, and so we're grateful. You can also find us on all the social media platforms, and we're talking about good stuff. We're talking with good people. If you go to goodlifetelevision.org, you can see lots of interviews, and all the long form interviews are there, and power clips are there, and it's just great stories of overcoming, of people doing great work, people advocating for great causes, people starting things, people overcoming. It's a great collection of goodness there, and we also keep it real here, which is one of the things that's important to me, that there's a lot of suffering in the world. Some of our recent guests, we've been talking about suffering all over the world, and we know there is a lot of suffering, and yet we try to shine light, and so that's what we're doing, and that's what we're doing today. I'm so excited about my guests. Courtney and Colby Horvath are with me. They're joining us from outside of Boston, Massachusetts. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Hello.
Thanks for having us.
So Dr. Courtney Horvath is a board certified toxicologist and drug development professional. And so she's had and she once was a ballet dancer. I did read that.
Yes, true.
And then she completed her PhD in postdoctoral training at Dartmouth Medical School. So she's had a distinguished career. And Colby, which we're gonna talk about, a lot. And I will say that as you're looking at the screen, you can see some of Colby's photography behind you. We're going to talk about that. But Colby's journey with lymphoma, starting at age 8, led to and inspired Courtney to become a passionate advocate for childhood cancer patients and to raise awareness of desperate need for more targeted and accessible treatments. And so we're going to talk about that. So maybe Courtney, maybe you could start with taking us back to the beginning of this journey, this starting at age 8 with Colby. Take us kind of back to the beginning of that.
Definitely. It's actually interesting because it was exactly 2 years ago today, right now, that we
Wow.
got a phone call. It's funny to be here talking about this because it seemed like we would never make it to this point. But for quite some time, Colby just had a small mass underneath his ear. We had it screened, looked at, all signs pointed to it was nothing to be concerned about. Over time, it started to kind of change and develop in a way that his physician thought we should just take it out. But even at that point, there was absolutely no concern that it was going to be anything more than just a benign kind of growth. And Colby had the mass removed. This happened right at the start of the pandemic. My husband actually is an ICU doctor, so he was in the hospital heading up a lot of the surge capacity with the number of patients that were coming back in March of 2020 with COVID. We had the mass removed, and about 5 days later got a phone call that unfortunately it was cancerous, and Colby needed to immediately start up to 9 months of intensive chemotherapy with over 10 different chemotherapeutics, followed by at least 18 months on a maintenance protocol, which would mean chemo every day, and then 5 years of follow-up. So, at 8 years old, we were looking at he would be 15 by the time we, put this all hopefully behind us.
Wow. And so 2 years ago, you get that call. Talk about receiving that and talk about kind of the family, how families are dealing with this. Very rarely do we get to talk to one and actually get inside, what goes through your mind.
It's like your whole world is flipped upside down in the blink of an eye. About an hour before the phone call came in, we had a spring snowstorm that day. Our kids were outside building a snowman. adjusting to like our new quarantine life. And then all of a sudden it's this call comes and you know, you don't even know how to react. There's no way you could ever prepare yourself to receive that type of information. We were relatively lucky because Colby, he was perfectly healthy otherwise. Just weeks before we were skiing the back bowls in Vail for a week. And a lot of families that end up in this situation, they usually are potentially noticing some signs or issues, and it takes quite some time to get to the diagnosis. So our case was a bit unusual that it happened out of left field, and we knew almost immediately what we were dealing with, which was a lymphoma with a good prognosis. It had a 90% cure rate, which helped certainly to know that chances are that Colby was going to be okay when we come out of that. But I'll never forget the feeling of thinking, 2.5 years of chemotherapy we had ahead of us, and thinking, we'll never make it. How will we do that? 2.5 years with an 8-year-old little boy. That's, it felt like an eternity to think that we could have to go through that. Here we are now. Colby's almost done. He has 2 months left to go. But that's a feeling I think I'll never certainly be able to recover from.
Wow. And so 2 years in, 2 months to go, you're saying, and are we on track? I mean, is everything okay? How's it looking now?
Yeah, everything's looking great in terms of his cancer. He went into remission relatively quickly, and then a lot of the challenges really come with the side effects from the treatment. And Colby could talk about this too, but his oncologist basically said, I'm really sorry, we're going to have to make you sicker before we can make you better. And that was true. For the first 9 months, he suffered from incredible toxicities, temperatures of, one time his fever was 106 degrees, rashes all over his body, mouth sores. People think about childhood cancer, they think about the nausea, the hair loss, the fatigue. That's just the easy stuff, honestly. There's incredible toxicities that come along with these drugs that are really old. And it's been tough. It's been a tough journey. The first 9 months were the worst, and then Colby went on to what they call a maintenance protocol, which is right now every 12 weeks he goes into a more intensive set of treatments where he'll go into the hospital, he goes under anesthesia, he gets a lumbar puncture, and they put chemo directly into his spinal fluid, and then he gets an infusion through a chemo port that he had surgically placed, and then he does 5 days of high dose steroids, which Colby will probably tell you is the worst for him. It's like hitting your system so hard, and all of a sudden, hungry, cranky, tired, really, really tough. And then after that kind of real week of difficulties, Colby basically, he takes oral chemo at home every day. So every night before he goes to bed, he takes chemotherapy. But, for the last year or so, he's been able to live a relatively normal life, aside from the fact that he's, much more fatigued than a normal 10-year-old little boy. And those weeks that he has the treatments really knock him off his feet for, usually a week or two.
Wow. So Colby, you're a tough guy.
Yeah.
What's this been like for you?
It's been pretty hard for me because as my mom said, there are so many toxicities. There are fevers, mouth sores, rashes, and on top of all of that, I've had to wear leg braces. So it's really hard for me to do anything and keep up with my friends. I've also lost most of my hair, but now, as you can see, we're back in business.
It looks good. It looks good to me.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So this has been a life-changing thing. So, well, Colby, I admire you a lot. Very few people can make it through what you've made it through for 2 years. It's incredible, and you are really strong, and I know your mom is too. So I want to talk about how you got into photography. Tell us what started this.
Well, so one day I was in the hospital, and my child life specialist, her name is Heather, shout out to Heather, told me about this foundation called Pavlov, and it's basically where it's a foundation that helps kids with cancer express themselves in basically a new language, which is taking photography classes. And pediatric cancer is drastically underfunded, and Pavlov actually helps that. All the money that they raise, they give it back to make new medicines.
Really? And Courtney, you've joined the board, right?
I did. I recently joined the board. We've just been so, when your child goes through something like this, it's hard to not want to contribute and try to make a difference. And I think we've had a lot of energy around, raising money and raising awareness. And the Pavlov Foundation has just been something that's been close to our hearts for many reasons, but Colby in particular has really benefited from the program. He took a number of photos, which you can see behind us. He loved going to the class each week, and he really found a way to express himself and his feelings. It might be hard to see, but we could send it to you. The photo in the middle, it's a tree that is, I'm not actually sure if it was struck by lightning or what, but you can see it's kind of half dead and half growing. And Colby, interestingly, he had some really bad toxicity from one of his chemos, and in the end, he ended up not being able to walk. It was right at the time when he signed up for Pavlov. They sent him a package with a camera, an excitement around starting this class. And it was the motivation that Colby needed to get off the couch, to try to progress a little bit more. So we would just take his camera, and each day we would go out and we would walk, and we would get a little bit further, just a little bit each time. And as he got further into the course, we made it around into our neighborhood, and Colby took a picture of that tree. And throughout the course, they had to, sort of think about what the photos meant. And he described it. He named that photo Resilience. And he described it, he wrote in the course, "This tree is like me because it looks like it's been through some tough times, but it's growing from them, just like me." And, for us to be able to see Colby have a different type of voice to express himself, and also know that the money that Pavlov raises is not just going to, fund the cameras and stuff, but it's also actually going to fund grants that help find less toxic treatments. It was really like the perfect fit for us to put some real energy into helping to advocate.
Wow. Well, Colby, I love photography too, and I'm not as good as you, but I do have my camera, and I basically photograph my kids playing sports. I've become like the dad with the camera. I'm that guy, and I'm not that great. But what do you like about photography?
I like it because it's kind of like seeing things from a totally new perspective. If like I see something cool, I could be like, "Oh wait, that's so cool." And I could just get out my camera and like look at the positioning and then take a photo. And it's also really exciting to know that taking one photo could help save lives maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can capture moments too. And so what is your favorite like, are you photograph I can see behind you are you photographing kind of landscapes, nature, or is it basically anything that kind of catches your eye?
Yeah, basically.
That's
Not.
so great.
He'll take a picture of anything.
Yeah.
But when you did first start the course, Shutterbugs, the first couple of weeks, Colby had just got a puppy. So the photography, the lead professional photographers actually lead the course. I think Colby submitted about I don't know,
50.
at least 300 pictures of this puppy over the course of the session.
Wow. So now, real quick, just so I can wrap up the part about kind of where you are in the process. So now we have 2 months left of this treatment, and then there's kind of a 5-year follow-up period, but he's not receiving any chemotherapy or anything during that 5-year period.
Correct. So after he finishes treatment, which will be in the end of May, we'll move into a follow-up program. For the first year, he'll actually still need to be seen in the oncology clinic every month. So we will kind of continue the routine that we're on right now, but he'll phase off of his chemotherapy. A lot of the kids end up taking a lot of other medications to deal with the side effects, so his immune system is not where it needs to be. He'll continue a lot of that medication for probably about 6 months until hopefully his immune system recovers and a lot of the toxicity will hopefully start to come back to a better and healthier state. But yeah, that's the plan. So we've got another couple months to go, and then we'll hopefully start moving forward and helping his body to recover and heal.
Wow. Well, we're rooting for you. That is. I'm glad to be here 2 years in. I'm glad you're not back 2 years from today. I'm glad you've made it, and you're getting close to seeing the light, which is exciting. And Colby, how do people see your photography if they wanted to see it online? Is there a spot?
Yes, there actually is. I'm glad you asked. So, if you want to buy any of these photos, most of them are on pablov.org/colbystrong.
Pablo, so PABLOVE
Yep.
/Colby Strong.
Yep.
Yeah.
Colby Strong.
Yeah, that's a landing page that we made. We, through the course of Colby's treatment, decided to try. Colby is actually the first Pablo Shutterbug, is our understanding, to try to fund their own research grant. So we are trying to raise money to actually fund a research grant in Colby's honor that'll be given to an early stage researcher who's looking at less toxic treatments. But on that landing page, you can also enter to a Colby Strong Photoshop where you'd be able to see a lot of the photos that he's taken.
Oh, that's so good. So pablov.org/Colby Strong. So Courtney, I wanted to circle back in the time, a few minutes we have left, to you're talking about less toxic treatments. And I know that you developed a passion and for this area. Talk about this situation and what you've experienced and what your hope is.
Definitely. So, I mean, what most people probably don't realize is that pediatric cancer is really underfunded. So, of like the billions of dollars that get allocated to oncology research, the typical number that people will see is that 4% of that is specifically allocated to pediatric oncology, which means that there's not enough research to help understand how these cancers are developing and how they can be better treated. So the majority of the drugs, so every drug that Colby has taken, and Colby knows this too, was developed during what time?
In the 1950s to the 1970s, even before she was born.
That is true. So if you think about that and like what was happening in the world, Colby takes a chemo every night that was approved for use. Most of these drugs were first approved for use in adults, and then they get scaled down, the dosing to give to children in 1953. It's just
Wow.
incredible to think that we don't have better options for these kids. So it's become, of course, my job is to ensure that medicines that are getting developed are safe. So it's been difficult for the last 2 years to feel like we've been living in this world where that's not a priority in pediatric oncology, and a lot of these medicines are just causing such toxic side effects. And to me, it's just we have to just start speaking up and demanding more and making sure that people are understanding and paying attention to this problem so that we can get more innovative, more targeted, and less toxic treatments.
Yeah. And this is, I mean, this is your area. This is your area of specialty, right?
Yes, exactly. So, and of course, I know these things, right? And I work in this field, but I think until I experienced it myself with our own child, it's been eye-opening. I think we make a lot of medicines, and especially in pediatric oncology, there are some new medicines. The challenge is it takes a long time to get them to be what's called frontline treatment, which is like the first pass at someone being diagnosed. So if Colby had failed on the protocol that he is on right now, he potentially would have been a candidate for other types of more innovative treatments. But because they're so new and they're not being used as much, it's harder they're not readily available to most patients, even though they're out there. So, it's a tough problem. It takes time. It's complex. It's not any one part. It's not the academia. It's not just industry. It's people needing to come together, all of these foundations as well, and try to work towards a better situation.
Yeah, well, it will be, well, I'm really interested in that as well. We'll be certainly following the progress. And so the Pablo Foundation then is not only helping kids like Colby just in terms of the photography and stuff, but they're actually giving back money toward research.
Correct. So the money that comes from donations and also selling the kids' photography and partnerships like they've just developed with Fracture Glass, which is what these are all printed on, are glass. Fracture Glass has just started selling Shutterbug, a collection of Shutterbug's photography. So the great part is that money that's raised, exactly as you say, it doesn't just fund helping the kids with photography, but it funds seed grants for researchers that are kind of more early in their career, that are just starting out, that have a great idea, but don't have enough experience to maybe get a big governmental grant just yet. So Pablo Foundation funds these seed grants, and then it allows the researchers to develop the data that they need to then get a much bigger grant and hopefully make an impact in the near future.
Oh, that's so good. So people can go to pablov.org, right? And if
Correct.
they're interested in giving, if they're interested in learning more, Pablov, so PABLOVE.org.
Yep.
And if you want to see photography from the great Colby Horvath, you can go to pablov.org/Colby Strong. So Colby, just remember, if anybody asks you, what you've done in life, you can always say, well, I beat cancer. What have you done?
Exactly. He's done a
You're
lot
real
more than
tough.
the average 10-year-old.
Yeah, Colby, you're amazing. You're going to have an amazing life, and you got an amazing mom, and we're rooting for you guys. Congrats on the photography. I need to learn something from Colby's photography. That's for sure. But thank you guys so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having us.
And we'll see you next time.